Good afternoon, and thank you for taking the time to access this video, which I hope will be of some use and support for each of us who are involved in our teacher inquiry cycles in line with the appraisal objective 3 focus. I'm going to start by sharing my PowerPoint and talk you through what I hope that will come out of this session, and then hopefully what I do talk about will then support those intentions of this meeting and this video. Okay. Okay, so hopefully we can see on screen this slide that says key knowledge and key reading, which is a specific part of the teacher inquiry documentation in the process where we would already have got to the point, hopefully now, of having considered the context that we're investigating, the specific question that we want to look at, and our hunch about what might come out of investigating that question. Taking that further, then we now need to consider how we may support and investigate on a deeper level, drawing upon external evidence as well as what happens within our schools to support us in our understanding. With that in mind, this comes from the perspective of Holy Family Catholic Mat as a research-informed trust, and that through ongoing evaluation review, we work to improve the organisation to meet our vision, formation, inspiration and transformation in the service of all members of our community. Okay, taking that forward, what does that mean from an inquiry point of view? One thing it does mean is that there are literally thousands of research resources that we can or could access in order to support us in understanding and grappling with particular problems that we face. Linked to that, the first big challenge is therefore finding what resources and which resources we would like to access, particularly when there are so many. Where do we start? How do we catalogue them? What can we look for? Once we've accessed a number of resources, how do we then navigate those resources in an efficient way is obviously a key next challenge. So it's all very well having a load of resources, but which ones are the ones we need to use and how do we know which are the best? That then links to the idea of making meaningful use of these resources, which is perhaps the biggest challenge of all. Because just because a series of pieces of evidence might exist or a series of pieces of research have taken place that we can then draw upon, it doesn't mean they're necessarily useful for our specific inquiries or within the context within which we work. So not only do we need to find them, then navigate them, but we need to understand how we can best synthesize what is suggested through these resources to support us in our greater understanding, facing the challenges we particularly want to investigate. That's to say that, therefore, there is no one source, no one resource that is best. And what you use will depend on your own specific focus. So for many of us, this will involve looking at formative assessment aligned with our focus as a trust upon the EFA programme working with SSAT. For many other people, this might also include, or instead of the EFA, focus specifically upon work with the Creativity Collaborative and or the Laurel Trust. It could even be something that's not connected to those areas, but fundamentally, you will have a specific focus that you want to investigate as classroom teachers, as I myself do, and this will be the thing that is used and is the best lens through which to consider which research we should access. It will also depend, in terms of the research that we use and access, upon our own existing knowledge. This might be things we've already read, things we've already done in the past, our own experiential knowledge, but also from working with colleagues and working alongside colleagues to investigate problems and draw upon their expertise as well. So that collaboration is crucial within this. Of course, it will also depend upon, and we cannot deny, a number of practical considerations. Every one of us will be a busy person in one way or another, with many, many things going on, as schools always have going on, which take our time, take our resources, take our energy. So for us to then access in a meaningful way research to try and investigate a particular problem out of many possible challenges, then we need to consider how best we can allocate our resources, which do include time. So we need the most efficient way of being able to use research to support us in our understanding. So what does that mean? Well, in terms of finding these resources, there are many things to do. And obviously straight away you can see Google. Googling, looking, searching the wider internet will present many, many things. And I'll expand upon this a bit further when I go on to the next slide. We have as well, I mentioned the EFA programme as a key driver, the resources that go alongside that. We all have access in the trust to the National College and use this for many of our statutory policy-related activities, but also as a resource for being able to understand and learn about different aspects of pedagogy, about educational practice. Like this, we also have a subscription, many of us do, or people within our schools will have access to the Chartered College and the resources they provide. We have the EEF, which is well renowned and well known as a key source of evidence and a key source of resources for understanding any number of problems, and also as a group, the Educational Endowment Foundation, who have done a number of big research projects into a number of the issues that many of us face in different schools. Likewise, we have the evidence-based education, in particular their toolkit. We have Twitter, and again, nodding to the notion of time, Twitter is very accessible, as many other social media, education social media, EduTwitter, those sorts of things are for people to access. We have websites like this one, which you can subscribe to for free, and they send out quick weekly 5-minute digests of pieces of information, pieces of research linked to various things that we face within schools, almost as a prompt to thought and investigation, but also as a resource in and of itself, etc. Because of course we can't cover everything in this presentation, and we all know many different places where we can access research. We can include books, we can include particular researchers, Dylan Wiliam, Thinking EFA, Tom Sherrington, Gert Biester, and many different people in different areas, and many of our colleagues would be able to share their own knowledge within that area. But what does that mean in terms of once we find whichever resources, and here there will be many available, for us being able to navigate it? And I think what it does for me is it goes back to the core question, and literally the core question, of what it is we're trying to achieve. So if I share here from my own teaching and learning inquiry my intention to look at to what extent does mini whiteboards, Thinking EFA programme, implemented for a term, improve the crafting and improving habits among Year 10 higher prior attaining, pupils, so HAP pupils. When I have that question in mind, that instantly starts to frame and give a lens for what I might look at. So when I start and when I click on a link in Google, I'm not just randomly looking at education. I'm looking at specifically, for example, the command phrase, mini whiteboards, or perhaps crafting and improving, or high prior attainers, or whatever aspect of that question that I particularly want to get to grips with through research. And it may be all aspects actually, but starting with the first command word, the mini whiteboards. If I were to now click on Google, and this is obviously assuming it works pre-populated, that takes me to a link where I've literally typed in, and hopefully that's now visible, the use of whiteboards in the classroom. And you can see there, that was just a phrase I typed in. And straight away, if you can see the page I can see, you're taken to a statement from a website. You then got scholarly articles for use of whiteboards in the classroom. We have the Research Schools Network, the use of whiteboards in the classroom. So if I were to click on that, that gives you some information that somebody else, some other, in this case, the Durrington Research School in December 2021, has carried out, linked to Dylan Wiliam's view of formative assessment, in order to explain the advantages in this case and the disadvantages of whiteboard use. So that's something I can hopefully engage with relatively quickly to start to think about, in terms of my own experience, where this particular pedagogical approach might start to support me in moving my teaching forward. Okay. Likewise, if I go back to the PowerPoint, and I won't go into the huge amounts of detail for each one for obvious reasons and for time, but what I will do is just click on quickly some examples so you can see what I'm talking about in terms of how I might access this. So in terms of the EFA program itself, when I looked on here, I went on to the EFA program summary of embedding formative assessment specifically. And when I went on to the summary of embedding formative assessment, of course, that isn't the word whiteboards, and it isn't the phrase whiteboards, but I know that whiteboards are related to the notion of embedding formative assessment. So when I first typed in whiteboards to the EFA and nothing came up, that command phrase I then expanded further within the area that I was trying to look at. And again, this document is something I could potentially use to support me in my thinking. National College, really quickly again. So again, assessments and feedback seem relevant to what I might be trying to do through my use of whiteboards. So again, it's moved a little bit further again from the core, but it's also something that might give me a wider contextual understanding of what I'm trying to achieve. This video below that I first looked at, just down here, it relates specifically, you can see, to something to do with James Hopkins University, which didn't feel to me something particularly I wanted to look at. But then when I looked at the next one, effective questioning techniques, a practical guide to enhance classroom engagement. Okay, it's primary level, and me as a secondary school teacher might not seem obvious, but the pedagogies inherent within that are really useful. And again, that takes an hour. So again, going back to time, would I choose to spend my time doing that? It depends on what I'm trying to achieve and what else I've found elsewhere, but it's one option. We have the Chartered College itself. So a bit like the EEF, there's a document here, one-page document about mini whiteboards done and created by Tom Sherrington and Sarah Stafford, which talks through, for example, the implications for teachers, which would be really useful as a synthesis of wider research in one paragraph that really can help me hone my thinking. I've already mentioned the EEF. I've already talked about evidence-based education. Now I have a subscription to this myself, free. And what you find when you go on to here, when you've signed up, there are various things, but one of them is the evidence review, 72 pages long again. But again, within this, I might put those command words in, which would then hopefully enable me to find specific things. For example, here on page 22, creating a supportive environment, how the whiteboards maybe support that, or what's the purpose of that? So again, through my use of a command words within the document, I can go to those things that might be most used for me understanding the specific focus that I'm trying to do some work with. Twitter I've already mentioned, and again, when I went to Twitter and wanted to look at formative assessments, something that came up was Tom Sherrington and then Rosenshine's principles. And again, if we look further at Rosenshine's principles as the next level, what I'm finding are connections between pieces of research. Link me to a new piece of research I might not have considered. And I've got to take out of the time I've got and my own interest and the specificity of my question. But what I can do is from initial links, good articles and good resources, including short 30-second reads such as Twitter, will provide further links and further hints at areas I might want to look at. Okay. For example, if I go down to etc., the Twitter, they're linked to Rosenshine, and my own reading previously prompted me to maybe look at work by Tom Sherrington more closely. So again, online, I'm able to find and have a physical copy of his walkthroughs, and there are various things within there that you might want to look at. There are various resources, but fundamentally, I'd be looking at these in terms of, again, my use of whiteboards and also my use of formative assessment more broadly. So you can see there's a variety of resources out there, starting with those really important command words. Once you've got that information, the question is then, what do you do with it? And for me, making meaningful use of these resources comes back to interpreting and making the most efficient use of the time that you have. So interpreting that evidence in a meaningful way. And one thing that's I found really useful is considering research in terms of the EEF's concise guide to using research evidence. And I will open this tab and jump down to page 7. So when I jump down to page 7, which is here, the first thing that jumps out at me is the notion of claims. So when I'm reading a piece of research in the limited time I may have to look at something, I'm instantly scanning it, not only in terms of the question I'm posing, but also what are the conclusions that this article draws? What are the limitations of them? So who was it done with? In which context? At which time frame? For how long? Etc. So I'm asking questions of how useful the information is in this piece of research, whatever it happens to be. Applicability. Does it apply to my own context and the pupils I'm working with? Is it relevant? Independence. Is it something that's funded by a group that I know would have a particular bias? So does this piece of research actually not only provide meaningful information, but valid information as well? What methods we use? Can those methods be methods I also use in my own wider research, as we'll see as we go through this process? Who are the sample population? These are all questions I'd be asking of any piece of research, however small or however large, before I then just take it off the shelf and use it to inform my own practice. Likewise, moving on from claims, and this document gives you in the 11 pages a bit more of a comprehensive view of that. There are some key statements that are made. So getting beyond the surface, building a rich evidence picture. So drawing perhaps from a variety of studies, such as the EEF's Teaching and Learning Toolkit, but also those various resources and sources as examples that I shared just a few moments ago. Maintaining criticality. So asking questions, don't just accept that a piece of evidence is the answer, but rather is that piece of evidence useful for us? Where does it come from? Is it meaningful? And again, I don't want to talk too much given the time that you have to give to watching this video, but there's various things you could use this document as an example to help shape your understanding. Again, things like balancing likely benefits of changing the practice against the cost, the impact. So it's not only did this thing work, but actually would this work here? And actually, is making this thing work a valid use of my time and money if that's the case? Do we need to include other people in it? So considering the processes and people required for change. And as always, when we're doing research, we'll find that the more we read and the more we research, further questions are asked. So constantly going back to the notion of claims, but also the notion of what is your core question? Why is that question the thing you want to investigate? And what is it you want to look at specifically? Keep going back to that when we're looking at something. And it enables us to be efficient in terms of discarding those things we know are going to be irrelevant and focusing on those key command words that are most supportive of us understanding the specific problem we're grappling with. Okay, to taking this further, we will be providing, and there will be access, as you may already have, to the inquiry toolkit, where these resources will be built by the inquiry team, the support team of inquiry coaches, and the wider inquiry team, such as myself and Claire Rufo, lead practitioners across the secondary schools, etc. So this will be built as time goes on. We'll also have other shared resources going forward, including things like HFC Connect as an online forum to discuss these issues. We have the inquiry coaches themselves. So if you have further questions that aren't answered by working on this yourself, by working with colleagues, by working with your appraiser, by accessing these resources, please do contact Claire Rufo at hfcmat.com about the possibility of having some one-to-one time with an inquiry coach. And then obviously any further questions, please do get in touch. Okay, I hope this was useful and I hope this is something we can take forward. And I do thank you very much for the time you've given to watching this video. And again, if you have any further questions, please do get in touch. Many thanks, and that's me done for today.